The question is, what are you afraid of? For me, I'm afraid of snakes, taking tests, and even the dark. One of my kind of superhuman skills is being able to climb, specifically trees, and the problem is I'm afraid of heights. So I've been known to get up high in a tree and then get stuck and don't want to come down. I remember being in elementary school and we'd have to climb this rope. And because I was really good at climbing, I climbed really high, really fast. And I remember I did what you're not supposed to do. I looked down. And it was in that moment that fear gripped me and I froze. And I wonder today, I know that's a silly example, but what might you be afraid of? Maybe the fear of being able to get married or have kids. Maybe the fear of having healthy kids grips you. Or maybe there is fear of the unknown or a future doctor's report. I wonder what that might be for you. The fear of failure, the fear of something controlling you. Fear has a way of kind of keeping us all frozen. You see, faith is taking steps even when we can't see Jesus. And it's hard to take steps when we're frozen with fear. We're in this series that we're calling The 7 Signs of John, where we're looking at one of Jesus' best friends, John, and how he spent time with Jesus and he orientated his gospel for the first half around these 7 signs of John. And today we're going to look at the 5th sign, how Jesus walks on water. Right before this incredible sign, Jesus did one of the most incredible miracles of all time. He fed 5,000 people, plus women and children, up to 15 or 20,000 people in one time. It was incredible. And it was this mountaintop experience. But just like life, they move into more of rough waters, both literally and metaphorically. Isn't that how life is? We can move from a mountain all of a sudden into a valley in a snap. And so the text says that evening came and they got into a boat to go across the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee was 127 miles long and about 7 miles wide. And they were to cross on the other side. So this is like the size of Lake Mille Lacs. It's a significant body of water. And the text says that as they're rowing, strong winds begin to stir up and the wind and the waves get large. And they're rowing and they're about halfway through. They're about 3.5 miles in. And you can imagine how they have feeling spent at this time. They're exhausted. For one, they've been physically rowing. For two, it's evening, and so they have been doing ministry all day, and so they're probably physically spent, emotionally spent, and spiritually just exhausted. And it's in this moment in the middle of this body of water that the text says that Jesus was walking on water and they were terrified. Which seems like an appropriate response, don't you? You just to see a human in the dark of the night in the middle of the water amongst all the wind and the waves. They were terrified. It was like seeing a ghost, one of the gospel writers have said. It's like someone barefooting without a boat. It just doesn't happen, and so they're afraid. But what I find more significant than their feelings is what Jesus says. He says, "It is I. Do not be afraid." This is so significant. You see, in our English Bible, we can't really pick up on it, but for John, he's making a clear distinction here. And he uses the words ego eimi, which is the exact same language that is described about who God is in Exodus chapter 3. You see, in Exodus chapter 3, Moses has this moment with God at the burning bush. And God is sending Moses back to Pharaoh to bring God's people out of Egypt. And it's in that place that Moses asks the question, well, who should I say is sending me? And God's answer in Exodus 3 is the same answer that John gives. Ego eimi. I am is sending you. And so John wants his readers and his audience to see that Jesus is not just a random person walking on water, but he is in fact God. He was there in the beginning of time, and he was there in the beginning of all creation. And so it is this Jesus, this God, who is able to step onto the wind and the waves and walk on dry ground. Water and buoyancy bow to his wishes. The storm bows to his wishes. Sickness bows to his wishes. John wants us to know that Jesus is God, and this God is God over everything that we're afraid of. You see, fear is when we put our attention on our circumstance, on the wind and the waves, on the trials and the challenges of life. But faith is when we fix our attention on who Jesus is. In verse 21, the disciples say that they're willing to take Jesus into the boat, and immediately they get across to the other side. John wants us to see this, that more than Jesus magically removing the storm, he wants us to see that he wants to walk with us in the midst of one. John doesn't describe the storm ever again because he wants us to know that Jesus literally wants to walk with us through it. Mark and Matthew also record Jesus walking on water, and they put in some details of the story that John doesn't. One of those significant details is the fact that Peter walks on water towards Jesus. And it begs the question, well, why would John leave that portion out? I think he did it for a significant reason. For on both sides of the Jesus walking on water Bible text, John records that the crowds followed Jesus because of the miracles that he did. And John wants us to see that it's not about what Jesus can and or will do, but Jesus wants us to see, John wants us to see, that are we willing to invite Jesus into whatever scenario, whatever storm we're in. So what are you afraid of today? Is it a trial? Is it a circumstance? Is it a question mark? Is it fear that's got you frozen? Jesus wants you to say no today, that he is I am, that he is God, and he wants to invite you to bring him into whatever you're walking through.